Good morning. I am Melissa and I am an alcoholic, and I am doing step six out of the Life Recovery Workbook. I'm doing the readings. I'll have to do the questions when I get back from my appointment, but I wanted to do this because I wanted to get it started yesterday, but life is lifey, right? Okay, so step six. Um, we became entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character, right? So, step six is a pause step. Here we reflect on the information we have received about ourselves in completing steps four and five. By making an inventory of ourselves and admitting our faults and our shortcomings out loud to another person, we have come a long way in developing a more accurate way of ourselves, in building deeper trust in God, and in recognizing the impact of our addictions and dependencies on ourselves and those around us. Our work is not done. However, inventory is just the first half of the process through which, if we are thorough, we will walk away from debilitating addiction. Now we must begin to allow God's Spirit to work deeply in our hearts, routing out our defects of character and making changes in our behavior and attitude that will bring wholeness and serenity. At first, at first glance, it seems obvious that we would, of course, be ready to have our defects of character removed. Why wouldn't we want to be flawless and blameless? Isn't it our goal in the Christian walk to be perfected in the image of Christ? Some of our character defects have been useful to us, however, and they have sometimes been unnecessary or been necessary for survival. It can be very difficult to let them go when they have been so automatic and so deeply ingrained, but to have a successful, serene recovery, we must let God chisel away even the defects that we have been our default mode, that have been our default mode. Okay, um, so I'm just gonna, I'm not gonna do a lot of opinionating on this part right now because I have to leave in like 15 minutes. But so when it says, you know, these have been useful to us, like, so for example, I guess the way to look at, sorry, there's like a glare off my glasses. So I was trying to get rid of that. That's not working. Um, but okay, so yeah, it's still not working. All right. So what it means there, okay, like I used to be pretty good at manipulating. All right. So I would lie to one person and get my way there. And then when I got what I needed, I would go to another person and I would lie there. And those are the character defects that they're referring to. That's become helpful to us in our past, but are hard to let go of. Sometimes we lie and we don't even think, it just happens so naturally. You know what I mean? So, all right. Facing the brokenness of our sinful human condition is heartbreaking. As David learned in his life, he began as a man after God's own heart, with enough faith to slay giants, but later in his life, he committed adultery and murder. His success in bold acts of faith had he committed, or him, but later in his life, he committed adultery. His success in bold acts of faith as a young man led him to believe that he was invincible, or perhaps maybe he became a king, that laws and rules did not apply to him. Addiction is like that. It can be emboldened to us. It can embolden us to act profitably in the beginning, yet it brings grandiosity and arrogance, which led to our rationalizing and breaking of the morals, laws, and rules. As David forced the reality of his sin, he began to see arrogance of his youth and the value of humility. Such humility before God is forged through a broken spirit and a repentant heart. One huge character defect for all of us is trying to make life work in our own power. As God says through the prophet Isaiah, you spend your money on food that does not give you strength. We often believe in our self sufficiency, that we can only fill this hungry role in our souls with alcohol, sex, food, money, power, pornography, whatever it may be. We will be satisfied. These turn out to be empty wells, but we keep compulsively running to them. We become addicted and dependent. In step 6, we become entirely ready by once more acknowledging that our ways of life, handling life, even if they have helped us survive in the past, are not what God intends for us. We became ready to have God remove these defects while acknowledging that we have no power to change ourselves. Here again, we must have our prideful ego dashed if we are to have freedom and serenity. If, after looking at our list of defects, we embark on our own self-improvement program, we may pour a lot of frantic energy into getting better and trying harder without any real change occurring. It says in the big book that, what, his God did for him in just a matter of a few months is something we couldn't have mastered in 5 years by ourselves on our own will. So we must let go of the struggle, give over our will on each defective character, and become open to his work in our heart. Grasping our complete dependence upon him for lasting change takes a great deal of humility and willingness. However, let us not assume that we are to sit around and wait for God to work magic on us. Becoming ready for him to remove our defects means that we develop humility and willingness and become open to behaving and acting differently. The interactions between Jesus and the crippled man lying by the pool of I can't say this very well, but it's Bethesda, exemplifies this aspect of step 6. Like this man, we who are addicted to having a sincere desire to be healed, to rise up and be productive, and to live a meaningful, purposeful life. We may get ourselves right to the edge of significant progress in recovery, but our character defects have crippled us so that we are paralyzed by fear and cannot get to the next level. And that is, fear is a big part of my story as well. I've had panic attacks most of my adult life, and I always ran to a pill or a person, but I never prayed on it. I didn't give it to God. I would be like an Indian giver of sorts, I would hand over everything and be like, God, take this. And then as soon as I had like that small emotion of fear that would happen, I would take it right back, and it ran my life for a long time. It's too risky. Fear of failure, rejection, or abandonment set in, and we sit by the side of the pool complaining about our helplessness or feeling sorry for ourselves because we must change and work at sobriety when the rest of the world can still enjoy the pleasures of whatever addiction is our comfort. This step focuses our attention on being entirely ready. And as though Jesus were saying it to us, would you like to get well? And that's what he says to him. He walks up to him and he was like, do you want to be healed? Is this what you want? If you want it, you've been here for like 30 years, and if you don't know the story goes like this. It says he's sitting at the pool, and he can't walk. So whoever can get in this water can be healed. All right. So he sits there, but you have to be like the first person in there. And he gives up, because his brother leaves him to go, which I believe his brother was Paul, who later became Saul. Don't quote me. Okay. I'm still learning myself, but the point is his brother left him crippled, and he was like, okay, poor me. And, so he decided, he was going to go to this pool, and every time the water would come on, he would just go to the edge and then not get in. So, are you ready? That's the question. It's not if somebody else is pushing you. Okay. It's not if, well, I got to get sober for my kids. Okay. That's a good idea. All right. But if you get sober or you recover, or you get in recovery for anybody else except for yourself, whatever I was always told, and I believe it to be true, whatever you put above your recovery, you're going to lose. And whatever you're recovering for, you will be resentful towards if you don't lose them. So, when it comes down, when it's, crunch time, you can't just expect, you know, you have to do it for yourself. That's the only way it's going to be a successful recovery. All right. So, no matter how scary or uncomfortable it may be, we can become willing to take new action towards fulfilling God's will. Okay. We may not feel like being honest where we have been dishonest. We may not feel like being considerate when we have been selfish. We may not feel like courageously facing our problems head on instead of running from responsibility, which I was really good at. I was a good runner. Um, get out of there. Um, Working step 6 in this way prepares us for step 7. So I'm going to read off gosh darn it. I should just finish reading okay. It says go to Genesis 23, 1 through 4. All right, I'm just going to read the questions off real quick. And when I come back, I will do the reading out of the Bible. Okay. What are the defects identified in step 4 and 5 that are standing in the way of my recovery and service to God? Make a list. The next question is, what have each of these defects done for me and against me? And it says, oops. So this is what it looks like, okay? You have your negative, positive, and then you have your defect, right? So you list them all just like that, okay? And this is out of page 14, or no, 54 and 55 of the Life Recovery Workbook. All right. And the next question is, as you look at this list, take some time to grieve. Feel the pain of the losses of both the positive and the negative parts. Some suggestions. Write about what you will miss about your defects and what you look forward to when these are removed. Oops. You can only type so much. That's just crazy to me. What you will miss about your defects. What you will look forward to when these defects are removed. Write about what you have learned about yourself in seeing the positive and negative parts. Have a burial service. The old passed away, so burn what you have written or rip up the list of defects. Now, when I had gotten out of rehab, me and two of the people that was in there, we decided we were going to do our steps together. And when we got done with our steps, everything we had wrote down, we took outside and we did the Lord's Prayer, and we did the 12-step prayer, and we burn it. As to me, that was like a sacrifice of all my, being gone. All right. So the next set of questions is under healing the brokenness. Those questions I just read off were taking time to grieve. All right. So now it's healing the brokenness. And how have the last 5 steps prepared me to be entirely ready for God to work in my heart? And it reads off Psalm 51, 16 through 9, and I will read that when I come back. In this psalm, David had to grow up a little. He had to accept that he was flawed in God's eyes and that he could never bring a sacrifice good or perfect enough to atone for those flaws. Am I oh am I still trying to bring God evidence of how good I am, or am I coming to a place of acceptance as David did? How does oh how does that acceptance help me stay out of my addiction, and explain? So, for the record, this is the story of David and Goliath. You know, he took out the giant, all right, with a rock, and but with God's help, he was the next anointed one to run the kingdom. And he 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 like really started loving this lady, and he had adultery with her and killed her husband. So, you know, there, and if God still accepts him, I mean, there's no there's no sin big enough for the cross. That's what one of my preachers that I listened to said, and I believe that. But that also doesn't mean that, all right, so I'm gonna go to church Sunday, and I'll, on Wednesday, I'm gonna go out of town and cheat on my significant other and go to the bar and have fun, and I can just atone for this later. That is not what that's not what that means. Okay, that means you are ready to stop, pivot, turn your life around, and give everything to him, right? Okay, moving forward. In what ways have I tried to fill the hunger of my soul and the thirst of my spirit with other substances and behaviors instead of trusting and following God's will? And these questions are under God's abundant pardon. All right. So if you don't know what pardon means, it means excuse. Am I ready to turn to God for abundant pardon and for continual nourishment of his spirit to keep me free of addictive behaviors? Why or why not? Do I believe, not just in my head, that the life God has for me will be more satisfying than the one I have lived under the cloud of addiction? Is my heart willing? Oh, goodness. Okay. All right. These set of questions are under removing deeper hurts. Okay. What deeper problems did my addiction shelter from my awareness? Pride, egocentrism, fear, anger, hatred, the arrogance of believing that I should go the way I want. What difficulties have I suffered due to lack of forgiveness or compassion for others? Am I ready to have these defects removed by God? Why or why not? When we are ready, God does his part. Our part is to get rid of excuses, stubborn resistance, holding on to familiar, and fear of change. That's not a question. It's just when we clear out these blocks and become entirely ready, it becomes clear that God must go do the rest, because only he can accomplish the miracle of setting our feet on the path of life again. What have been my excuses for not moving forward in recovery? Have I been stubbornly resistant to becoming entirely ready because I have been afraid of change? Are my defects too comfortable and familiar? Oops. Are these defects too comfortable and familiar? And these next questions are under removed, not improved, right? What self improvement tactics and methods have I used to get myself to let go of my addiction and character flaws? Meditate and dwell on the thought that we are no longer slaves to sin, addictions. For when died with Christ, we were set free from power of sin, addictions. Describe the feelings that arise during that time of reflection. Okay, we got two more, and then these are under attitudes and actions. Okay. Do I have a vision of the purposes for which God saved me spiritually and took me out of addiction? Describe. Am I now willing to accept that I will continue taking this step in order to grow, letting go of the old flaws to make room for the new strengths? Why or why not? And it says at the bottom, um, to be ready to battle means that we are appropriately equipped to meet the enemy. When we are ready to allow God to clean things up, there are battles to be fought that require us to be armed and ready. 1 Peter 4:1 seems to hold the key to what prepares us for battle with our character and its defects. Peter tells us to arm ourselves with the attitude of Christ, who is prepared and willing to suffer. For it is when we are willing to suffer that we are ready to stop sinning. Are you ready? If not, it's time to become ready. All right. I will be back and I will answer the questions and do the rest of the reading. Thanks for watching.